The snowstorm was merciless that morning. Wind howled through the trees as a small figure appeared, a little girl in a pink dress running barefoot through the white forest. She shouldn't have been there, but fate had other plans. Ahead of her lay a sight that would change her life forever. A police officer bound and half buried in snow, and beside her, a German shepherd lying still, his fur streaked with blood. The girl froze. Was it too late? Her tiny hands trembled as she knelt beside them, whispering, "Please wake up." What she did next would not only save their lives, but uncover a truth the world would never forget. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The morning began like a whisper, then turned into a roar. Thick flakes of snow spiraled from the gray sky, blanketing the forest in a suffocating white silence. The highway that cut through the trees was nearly invisible now, swallowed by the storm. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. It was the kind of cold that bit through fabric, the kind that froze breath midair. Officer Claire Mason tightened her gloved hands on the steering wheel of her patrol SUV, her breath fogging the windshield. She had been dispatched hours ago to check reports of strange activity near the northern woods, a possible smuggling route, according to the tip. Her loyal K9 partner Rex sat in the back seat, alert even as the wind howled. His ears twitched at every sound, eyes fixed on the white wilderness ahead. The radio crackled weakly through static. "Unit 12, do you copy?" The voice was faint, barely audible through the interference. Claire reached for the mic. "This is Officer Mason. Visibility's near zero, still proceeding northbound, over." The signal fizzled and died. She sighed, frustration creasing her face. "Great," she muttered, glancing at Rex. "Just you and me, partner." Suddenly, something flickered across the road. A shadow, quick and deliberate. Claire's instincts kicked in. She slammed the brakes, tires skidding across the icy pavement. The SUV lurched sideways and came to a shuddering stop near the tree line. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. She reached for her flashlight, stepping out into the storm. Snow whipped against her face, stinging like needles. She scanned the forest, her beam slicing through the blizzard. Nothing, just silence. But Rex growled low from inside the vehicle, a deep rumbling warning. Claire's pulse quickened. "Easy, boy," she whispered, taking a cautious step forward. Then through the veil of snow came a faint glimmer, a reflection of metal, half buried in white. She didn't know it yet, but that moment was the beginning of something far more dangerous than a routine patrol. The wind screamed through the trees like a warning, shaking the frozen branches. Officer Claire Mason's flashlight flickered as she took another cautious step forward. The snow beneath her boots crunched, each sound swallowed by the storm. She could barely see 2 feet ahead. Somewhere behind her, Rex barked sharply, his instincts on high alert. "Stay," she ordered softly, but he growled in defiance. Something was out there. Then it happened. A sharp crack split the silence. Claire turned, just in time to see a dark figure rush from behind the trees. Pain exploded at the side of her head and everything went black. When she opened her eyes, the storm had quieted. Her face was pressed into the snow, her wrists bound tightly with coarse rope. Her vision swam, but she could make out faint tracks, footprints leading away and tire marks disappearing into the distance. "The suspects were gone. Rex," she whispered hoarsely. Her throat burned. Then she saw him, her partner lying just a few feet away, motionless, snow collecting on his fur. His collar light blinked weakly, a small beacon in the white wilderness. Claire struggled against the ropes, her wrists burning as she twisted. Her breath came out in ragged bursts. "Come on," she gasped, trying to inch closer. But every movement sent waves of dizziness through her body. She could taste blood. The cold was creeping in, numbing her fingers and toes. She knew what that meant. Hypothermia was setting in fast. A tear froze on her cheek as she stared at Rex. "You did good, boy," she whispered, voice trembling. "You tried." Her eyelids grew heavy. The snow continued to fall, soft and merciless. The world was fading to white, and the only sound she could still hear was the faint, rhythmic beat of Rex's shallow breathing, then silence. For miles around, there was nothing but the whisper of wind and the quiet rise and fall of 2 loyal partners, trapped in the snow. Neither knew that help was coming. Not from the radio. Not from the force, but from someone small, innocent, and utterly unexpected. Fate was already on its way. In a small wooden cabin not far from the forest edge, a little girl named Lily Carter pressed her face against the frosted window pane. The storm outside had raged since morning, turning everything into a sea of white. Her mother was asleep in the next room, exhausted from a night shift, and the cabin was quiet except for the crackling of the fireplace. Then Lily heard it, a faint, distant sound that didn't belong to the wind. It was soft at first, almost like a cry. She tilted her head, listening harder. There it was again, a whimper. A dog's whimper. Her tiny heart skipped. A puppy? She whispered, her eyes wide with curiosity. She grabbed her little pink boots and slipped them on, wrapping herself in a blanket. The cold hit her instantly as she stepped outside. The snow was deeper than she expected, swallowing her small feet. But she pushed forward, following the faint sound echoing through the trees. Her breath came out in tiny white clouds.
"Hello?"
She called out, her voice trembling. "Are you okay?" The forest loomed around her, tall and silent. Then through the curtain of snow, she saw something dark lying on the ground. Her blanket slipped from her shoulders as she ran closer, her tiny hands clutching the edges of her dress. When she reached the clearing, she froze. There, half buried in snow, was a woman in a police uniform, her wrists bound with rope. And beside her lay a large German shepherd, still as stone, his fur dusted white. Lily's eyes filled with tears. She dropped to her knees, shaking the woman's shoulder gently. "Miss, wake up. Please wake up." The woman didn't move. Then Lily turned to the dog, brushing snow from his fur. "You're so cold," she whispered, her voice trembling. She didn't know who they were, but deep down she knew one thing for certain. They needed her. The wind howled through the trees as Lily knelt in the snow beside the fallen officer and her dog. Her small hands were trembling, but she didn't stop. She brushed more snow away from the officer's face, revealing pale skin and a faint bruise across her forehead. "Please wake up," she whispered again, voice quivering. There was no answer, only the sound of the storm pressing around them. She looked at the thick ropes tied around the woman's wrists and chest. They were rough and frozen stiff. Lily tugged at them with all her strength, but they wouldn't budge. Her fingers burned from the cold, yet she kept pulling until her knuckles turned red. "Don't worry," she said softly, as if the officer could hear her. "I'll help you. I promise." Then she turned to Rex. His breathing was shallow, his muzzle dusted with frost. She laid her tiny hand against his neck, feeling the faint pulse beneath his fur. "You're alive," she gasped, relief washing over her face. But his paw twitched weakly, and his eyes stayed closed. Thinking fast, Lily remembered the way her mother always covered her when she was sick. She pulled off her blanket and draped it over both Rex and the officer, tucking it as best as she could. The snow kept falling, heavier now, burying the edges of the blanket. She stood shivering violently, scanning the endless white forest around her. "I have to find help," she murmured. But when she turned toward the cabin, her tiny footprints were already half gone. The storm was erasing her path. Fear gripped her chest. Lily looked back at them, the woman and the dog motionless under the blanket. Tears filled her eyes. "Don't go to sleep," she pleaded. "I'll come back, okay? I'll bring help." She hesitated for a long moment, then took a deep breath and started running toward the faint outline of her home. Her boots slipped, her cheeks burned from the wind, but she didn't stop. Every few seconds she looked back. The sight of Rex's body and the fallen officer burned into her memory. The storm roared louder, but so did her determination. She had to save them, no matter what. The forest was silent again after Lily disappeared into the storm. Snowflakes continued to fall, soft and relentless, covering everything in white. Beneath the thin blanket she had left behind, Rex stirred faintly. A low whimper escaped his throat, followed by a twitch of his paw. His instincts, the very ones that had saved lives countless times, refused to let him give in. His ears flicked at the sound of the wind, his nose twitching as he caught the faint scent of the little girl who had been there moments before. Slowly, painfully, he lifted his head. His vision was blurry, but his mind was focused on one thing. Claire. Rex dragged himself across the snow, his paws leaving shallow trails behind. He pressed his muzzle against Claire's cheek, licking away the frost that had begun to form there. There was no movement at first, but then a faint breath, weak but real. He let out a soft bark, a cry of hope swallowed by the wind. His strength was fading fast, but he wouldn't stop. Not while she still breathed. He lay down beside her, pressing his body close to share what little warmth he had left. Minutes passed, each one colder than the last. The snow piled higher, but Rex stayed still, eyes fixed on Claire's face, his heart beating slow and steady beside hers. Far away through the storm, the faint flicker of red light began to appear, the flare Lily had lit after reaching home. Rex lifted his head, his ears perking despite the exhaustion. He didn't understand what it was, but somehow, he knew help was coming, and for the first time since the ambush, the loyal K9 closed his eyes, not in surrender, but in trust. By the time Lily burst through the cabin door, her face was flushed red from the cold, her tiny hands stiff and trembling. Mom, wake up!" she cried, shaking her mother's arm. Her mother, startled, sat up in confusion. "Lily, what's wrong? Why are you outside?" "There's a lady," Lily gasped, out of breath. "She's hurt. And a dog, too. They're in the snow." Her words tumbled out between sobs. Her mother's eyes widened. She glanced outside, the storm still raging. "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" "I'm not lying," Lily pleaded, grabbing her hand. "They need help now." But the cabin phone was dead. The lines had been knocked out by the storm. Her mother hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. The snow was too deep, the wind too strong. "We can't go far in this weather," she murmured, pulling Lily close. But Lily shook her head violently. "They'll die if we don't." Her voice cracked, desperate. She grabbed her father's old emergency kit from the shelf, the one he used back when he worked with the search and rescue team, and pulled out a bright red flare and a thick wool blanket. "Please, Mom. I can do it. I'll show them we're here." Her mother knelt, torn between fear and faith. Then she saw the determination burning in her daughter's eyes, the same look her husband once had before running into danger to save others. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, but you light the flare from here. I'll call for help on the radio." Lily stepped out again, wind whipping her hair. She struck the flare with trembling hands, once, twice, until it sparked to life, painting the snow red. She held it high, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please see it," she whispered into the wind. "Please come." The bright crimson light shot into the stormy sky, a desperate cry for help piercing through the white silence. And somewhere far above, circling in the distance, a rescue helicopter changed its course, drawn toward the flicker of one small girl's courage in the storm. High above the endless stretch of white, a rescue helicopter battled through the storm. The search team inside scanned the ground below, visibility near zero. "We're losing time," the pilot muttered. "If we don't find them soon, they won't make it." Then one of the crew members leaned forward, eyes widening. "Wait there. 9 o'clock, flare in the snow." A streak of red light burned through the blizzard like a heartbeat in the dark. "That's our signal," the co-pilot shouted. The helicopter banked sharply, descending toward the forest. Beneath the swirling snow, Lily stood clutching the dying flare, her tiny body shaking but her eyes fixed upward in hope. "Over there," she screamed when she saw the searchlight sweep across the trees. She waved her arms wildly. "Down here, please." The flare's glow flickered, then faded, but it had done its job. Minutes later, rescue officers trudged through the snow, following Lily's small footprints. "She went that way," one of them shouted over the wind. Lily led the way, her cheeks raw from the cold, her boots sinking with every step. When they reached the clearing, the rescuers froze. Before them lay a scene both haunting and miraculous. A police officer bound in snow, her K9 pressed tightly against her, both barely breathing. One of the medics dropped to his knees. "They're alive!" he yelled, checking for a pulse. "Get the stretcher, and now!" As they worked quickly, wrapping Claire and Rex in thermal blankets, Lily stood back, tears of relief blurring her vision. A kind-faced paramedic knelt beside her. "You found them?" She nodded silently. The man's voice softened. "You saved them, sweetheart." The whir of the helicopter grew louder as they carried Claire and Rex aboard. Lily watched as the officer's limp hand brushed against Rex's paw, even unconscious. They remained side by side. As the helicopter lifted off, snow swirling around them, one rescuer looked down at the little girl standing alone in the clearing, pink coat glowing against the gray storm, and whispered, "That kid just did the impossible." In that moment, the forest wasn't silent anymore. It was full of hope. Inside the helicopter, the cabin was a blur of motion. Paramedics worked frantically over Officer Claire Mason, checking her pulse, wrapping her in heated blankets, and placing an oxygen mask over her face. "She's hypothermic, pulse faint but steady," one of them said. Another medic knelt beside Rex, who lay motionless on the stretcher beside her. His temperature's dropping fast, but he's still breathing. The pilot's voice cut through the radio, tense and focused. "ETA, 10 minutes to St. Mary's Hospital. Hold on down there." Lily sat quietly in the corner, bundled in a rescue jacket, her small fingers gripping the edge of the seat. Her eyes darted between the woman and the dog, tears glistening as she whispered, "Please don't die." One of the rescuers smiled softly at her. "You did something brave today, sweetheart. If it wasn't for you, they wouldn't be here." Back at the hospital, emergency lights flashed as the helicopter touched down. Medical teams rushed forward, wheeling the stretchers inside. The warmth of the ER replaced the brutal chill, but the tension was just as sharp. Doctors and nurses flooded the room, voices overlapping. "We've got a severe concussion, low body temperature, and possible internal injuries. Dog's heart rate weak. Get a veterinary trauma team on standby." Hours passed in chaos. Through the observation window, Lily stood clutching a blanket around herself, watching silently. The sight of Rex fighting for breath made her chest tighten. "Come on, boy," she whispered. "You can do it." Finally, after what felt like forever, a doctor stepped out, pulling down his mask. His expression softened when he saw Lily. "They're both alive," he said gently. "It's a miracle they survived that cold." Lily's eyes widened, a smile breaking through her tears. She pressed her palms together, whispering, "Thank you." Inside the recovery room, Rex stirred weakly, his tail giving the faintest wag. Claire's fingers twitched at the same moment, her pulse growing stronger. Even half-conscious, her hand found Rex's paw and rested there. Two hearts, human and canine, beating again because one little girl refused to give up. The next morning, sunlight streamed softly through the hospital window, melting away the memory of the storm. Machines beeped steadily beside Officer Claire Mason's bed. Her eyelids fluttered open, the world coming into focus in slow, hazy shapes. The first thing she saw was a small pink jacket hanging on the chair beside her bed, and a little girl curled up beside Rex, who now lay resting on a blanket near the foot of her bed. For a moment, Claire thought she was dreaming. Her throat was dry as she whispered, "Rex." The German shepherd lifted his head weakly at the sound of her voice, his tail thumping once against the sheets. Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Good boy," she breathed, her hand trembling as she reached for him. Lily stirred, blinking sleepily. When she saw Claire awake, her face lit up like sunshine breaking through clouds. "You're okay," she exclaimed, jumping up. "I thought you were gone." Claire smiled faintly, emotion tightening her chest. "I guess I owe you both my life." Moments later, a nurse entered, smiling warmly. "You're one lucky officer. The doctor said another hour out there and you wouldn't have made it." Claire's gaze shifted toward Lily. "She's the reason I'm still here." The nurse nodded. "She's been here all night. Wouldn't leave your side." Rex let out a soft whine, resting his head on Lily's lap. The girl giggled gently, stroking his fur. "He's my hero too," she said. "He never left you even when it was cold and scary." Claire blinked back tears, the weight of everything hitting her at once, and the snow, the fear, the silence, and this brave little soul who refused to give up. She reached out, taking Lily's small hand in hers. "You were the light in that storm, sweetheart." Lily smiled shyly. "I just didn't want you to be alone." At that moment, Claire realized sometimes courage doesn't come with a badge or a uniform. Sometimes it comes wrapped in a blanket, carried by a child who refuses to walk away. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew Rex had sensed that light before she did. 2 weeks later, the snow had melted into soft patches of white scattered across the city park. The air was crisp, the sky clear, a perfect day for something special. A small crowd had gathered near the gazebo, cameras flashing and uniforms shining in the sunlight. At the center stood Officer Claire Mason, her arm wrapped gently around Lily, and by her side sat Rex, healthy again, tail wagging proudly. The police chief stepped forward, holding a framed certificate. "Today," he began, his voice carrying through the chilly air, "we honor a hero, Someone who reminded us all that bravery doesn't come from size or age, but from heart. He looked down at Lily, smiling. Because of this little girl, Officer Mason and her K-9 partner are alive today. The crowd applauded and Lily blushed, holding tightly to Claire's hand. She glanced at Rex, who barked softly as if to thank her himself. He was so cold, Lily said shyly into the microphone. I just didn't want him to be alone. Her innocent words brought tears to more than a few eyes in the crowd. Claire knelt beside her, her voice filled with emotion. You didn't just save us, Lily. You reminded me what courage really looks like. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver badge, the K-9 unit insignia. This was Rex's old tag, she said, gently pinning it to Lily's coat. And now it belongs to you. The audience erupted in applause. Cameras clicked, and for a brief moment the scene felt timeless. A child, a hero, and a dog united by fate. Rex leaned forward, pressing his head against Lily's shoulder. The girl giggled and wrapped her arms around his neck. I love you too, she whispered. As the ceremony ended, Claire looked at the little girl and said softly, You saved 2 lives that day, Lily, but you also gave us something we can never repay, hope. The camera panned out, the wind gently rustling the flags behind them. The narrator's voice closed the story. Heroes come in all forms. Some wear uniforms, others wear pink coats. But every true hero carries kindness in their heart.